Just a quick book placement, product placement for my books under the author name Derek Hemingway. First, we have the first installment in The Human Saga, which is my epic trilogy of novellas about a future civilization of corporate fascism that is being invaded by an alien cult. We have The Mortician's Daughter, a dark fantasy set in Mesoamerica about a sorceress who blocks out the sun to create a kingdom of darkness and evil, full of ghosts and monsters. It's fucking awesome. Part 2 of the Human Saga, and then part 3. There's currently my first full-length novel in the works, so be on the lookout for that. That's about all. That heathen bastard! Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the second video of That Heathen Bastard. Yes, I just said welcome back to the second video. that's a little dialectic chaos for you there. So anyway, today I wanted to discuss a little something. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I've decided to officially make the plunge. And I hope you follow me, and I'm going to give you a very good justification why you should. That being why I will never vote blue ever again. Because I'm a moderate right-winger, okay? I'm a moderate right-winger with his own ideology that he's still developing, you see. And typically I voted very purple. I voted very purple. Now I'm just going to start voting red, and I'm about to explain you why. Remember that this is a platform for political talking points, and it is not a news show. With that being said, let us get into the topic. So, first, I obviously want to talk about what my reality is and how I identify. I identify as a Pacific Northwesterner. That is my reality. That is where I'm from. That is who I am. Excuse me. I do not identify exclusively as male, or exclusively as white, or exclusively as bisexual, or blah, 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 blah. I mainly identify as a Pacific Northwesterner who lives in that milieu, who is part of a conservative county in an otherwise mostly blue state, little red island in a big blue ocean. And I'm going to relate to this topic through that lens. That being said, I want to talk to you all about how the Democrats have essentially fucked Washington State up good. So this state, typically speaking, always had an issue with common garden variety domestic crimes like theft, thuggery, and substance abuse. But under the Democrats, it has only gotten worse. See, they basically decided that, oh, well, we can't tell these people that there's something wrong with them and they need help. That's not politically correct. We're not going to let you waste any money on your rehab shelters and your 12-step, which are just trying to convert people into Christians. They're predatory religion. Rawr! We are defunding. Yeah, and so they purposely underfund rehab, and instead be like, hey, we heard about this policy in California where they're going to send free money to people who are homeless and on drugs to get homed and off drugs. And they're going to keep receiving money so long as they're high and homeless. And I'm like, then they'll just stay high and homeless and keep taking the free money and spend it on more drugs. What the hell's wrong with you people? Then, of course, they also got soft on crime, so domestic crimes like robbery and thuggery in larger cities like Seattle or near Evergreen or area around Evergreen State University just got insane, right? Seattle literally had the fucking Chaz, okay? And then you also had neo-Marxist college students at Evergreen University literally patrolling the grounds with bats, looking for people that they were told by their thought leaders were, quote-unquote, neo-Nazi, air quote. And they became sort of a militant activist group almost overnight. And I'm like, and the Democrats are just turning a blind eye to most of this. There's been almost no consequences whatsoever. Domestic crime just keeps going and going up in Washington State. It may eventually get to a point where it becomes intolerable, in which case I'm going to have to probably try and leave the state somehow in order just to be safe. I've already pretty much said that at this point it's irresponsible to not have some kind of weapon in the home at this point, because you never fucking know. And now we got Jay Inslee in office as governor, and he's put his climate activism ahead of actual competent governance. We don't really need a lot of environmental activism here, okay? This is one of the greenest states in the union. People love the greenness of Washington State, conservative and liberal alike. We do have a pollution issue, but we do not have a serious climate issue. We are not California, where they have like smog in Los Angeles. We don't have like that level of pollution. There's quite a bit of pollution in, say, Seattle, but no greater than most large cities. We could certainly do better with our local area pollution index, but generally speaking, there's not much need for climate activism here. But like so many radicalized modern Democrats, dude, he was at a joint press meeting, and even Joe Biden was looking at the dude with his eyes wide like saucers, like, what's your problem? Like, if Joe Biden, who is literally mentally retarded at this point, thinks you're crazy, then you must be crazy. So that is the state that that is the condition that my home state has been left in by the Democrats. And you wonder why I fucking hate them. Like, you have no fucking idea what they've done to us. And really, it is kind of a reflection of the state of the modern Democratic Party, because they're more interested in political correctness and these sorts of newfangled, vaguely new agey, Gnostic, neo-Marxist policies than they are in competent governance and focusing on shit that actually works. They want to spread the message and more or less be like soft activists. There are those who are exceptions. You have your Tulsi Gabbards, who are actually quite principled, surprisingly principled for a Democrat. And even though Andrew Yang is a socialist, noticeably Andrew Yang is more principled and more honest than many of them are. I still wouldn't vote for them because I disagree with their policies, but I do respect them more as people. Which, you know, that's always good, to have respect for your fellow man. And it's not a given. You do have to earn it. It's give, earn, get. You know what I mean? It's respect is as much of an exchange as money is. And you got to earn that shit. Tulsi's earned hers, and so's Andrew Yang. But the rest of them, a lot of them are just straight up scumbags. And I honestly feel like maybe our governor, Jay Inslee, should be in a straitjacket. I genuinely feel unsafe talking about him. He makes me nervous. And I honestly used to call him Obama Jr. or Little Obama because a lot of his policies, at least initially, echoed Barack Obama's. When he first got into office, his policies closely matched Barack Obama, so I called him Obama Jr. So you know kind of what we're dealing with here. We're talking about basically white Obama who took a trip to the funny farm. Ugh. So imagine the Democratic Party having people like that within its ranks. Who in their right mind wants to vote for these people? Nobody in their right mind. That's who. Good God. Well, unless they didn't know. If they're ignorant, that's one thing. But if they actually know, then they're still voting blue. They got something wrong with them. Further to the point, there's also the history of the Democratic Party, which, if you might not remember, was actually the old conservative party of the South. They used to be a Southern conservative party, and the Republicans were the Northern conservative party. Democrats, many of the Democrats were actually KKK members, and they actually pushed things like Jim Crow and segregation and all that. The Democrats have a longer history of racism than the Republicans did. The Republicans literally formed on the platform of motherfucking freeing the slaves without breaking up the Union. Whereas the Democratic history is hella racist as shit. And the funny thing is, when they turned into a liberal party and they flip flopped and became liberal, they threw away racism. They actually somehow became eviler because they got into sort of Marxist and neo-Marxist activism and grifting and political correctness and soft on crime and just fucking up domestic centers and putting people's lives at risk. Because sure, Jim Crow may have segregated the South, but at least the economy was good enough that they could, generally speaking, have food on the table. They could have ended Jim Crow and ended segregation without embracing all of this bullshit. That he could have ended racism, but still had a decent economy. But no, we have to go full-on progressive retard mode and basically put people's lives at risk. And in case any of you try to take me out of context, by the way, I do not support Jim Crow. I do not. Even if I believed in something like segregation, and I don't, I would say that it should be elective, meaning that it should not be forced by the government. Because who you get to hang out with, or who gets the goods and services, is none of the government's business. That's overreach. I am a big anti-overreach guy, which is another reason why I would oppose the Democratic Party, because they're pro-overreach. By that moniker alone, they're my enemy. And if you feel like you can't get along with someone, you don't have to hang out with them, right? You don't have to be around them. Who said you did? If you want to segregate yourself, that's fine. Just don't make it into law. Would be my position. I don't really care either way. I'll just segregate myself from toxic assholes and call it good. But at the end of the day, the Democrats went from economically literate, evil racists to economically illiterate, evil socialists. Gotta love that Democrat Party, right? At the end of the day, the Republicans have their own problems. Generally speaking, the Republicans have had a history of their own sort of economic naivete. They would create programs and projects that were honestly way too fucking expensive to sustain long term. And they would cause their own problems. And generally speaking, I think the Republican foreign policy has always been very much in the vein of like George W. Bush. It was very much like the policy of W. It was quite typical. But when it comes to the state level, at least they are superior to the Democrats. It generally follows that there's an old saying in politics is that the right is wrong and the left doesn't get it. Meaning that the left doesn't understand the problem or doesn't see that one's there. The right understands the problem and sees that it's there, but somehow always ends up coming with the wrong solution. They would be superior in that at least they actually acknowledge there is a problem. They're trying to do something. And as I've said before, learning is a process, and failure teaches more than success does. So if the Republicans continue to fail, eventually they'll get something right. They will learn. We can work with that, okay? We can work with supporting the Republicans and getting them to be a better party. Either that or we can create a third-party option if we can't work with them. Third party is always out there. You can form your own political party. You can get noticed. You can get attention, all that. There's like 1.5 million WikiHows on how to do it. Albeit it would be a lot of effort, a lot of energy, and probably a lot of money. But if you could give us a third-party option, that would be fantastic. Suffice to say, when it comes to the state level, Republicans are superior. Their policies at the state level, generally speaking, make problems manageable. At the very least, they don't solve them, but they definitely make it manageable. Increased funding for rehab, having school resource officers give seminars to students, which I recall was something that happened to me in high school. And boy, the officer giving the speech scared us away from drugs, but good. Like it was years ago. I'm 31 years old now. I still sometimes get shivers from his presentation because he was just that compelling. Showing us the consequences of consumption of methamphetamine, which is like the number one hard drug here is meth. It is basically a poison. It is such a poison. And ultimately, the Republicans do a really good job of managing, doing hard on crime, and generally speaking, making sure that drugs do not get widely distributed and that rehab shelters are nice and funded and promoted. The problems become manageable. They certainly don't go away, but in time they could lessen to a point where it could become preventable. And generally speaking, also, the economic policies at state level do pretty well. It's the national level where Republican economic policies tend to fail. When you get to the state level, they do pretty okay. They could certainly do a lot better than they do. I would love to have like a libertarian governor or mayor. I remember there was this one guy a libertarian candidate for governor, who was super passionate and also looked quite a bit like Dave Bautista, actually. He was super passionate about the economy and the market in the state and wanting to change things and funding rehab centers and all that. And he literally just set up his podium and did it right in the middle of the road, right in the middle of a busy area, so people have no choice but to pay attention to him. This dude was an expert at getting attention. Like, he was godlike in that sense. Watching his seminar as it was broadcast over YouTube, and I'm like, how come no one's voting for this guy? He's got enough charisma for 10 people and enough passion for 5. I could have gone that way, honestly. In fact, I think I actually did vote for him that year because I couldn't help myself. It was just too compelling, man. I would rather see a Libertarian or Republican running this state than a Democrat any day. They are superior at the state level. Their policies work better. Now, obviously, we also are probably going to need, for the future, better political education that is easy to access. That being said, I think we need to spread the FEE like herpes. We need to get the FEE, or Freedom for Economic Education, out there and make it everywhere. I think we should also start more widely distributing books by Tom Sowell and Milton Friedman. And if possible, we should probably also start maybe petitioning the government to essentially make basic economics a mandatory course in high schools. We could essentially put basic economic education in high school and maybe make it a part of home ec, or make it a separate class altogether, maybe. But sure, it would cost more money. It would certainly cost more money, but the long-term gains would be unbelievable because you would have more economic literacy throughout the general populace, and therefore you would see greater gains in the market and in shares and investment, and you would probably start to see the national GDP going up and the state GDP rising quite rapidly within maybe over the course of 20 years, maybe like 2 decades, if the education was competently put together. Obviously, you would want economic experts books put in the schools. You can actually get them fairly cheaply. They sometimes come as cheap as like $5.99. the overall cost, I think, would probably be fairly minimal. And at the very least, I would be more than willing to pay the taxes for that. And I'm sure most other people would well. It basically pays for itself. And at the end of the day, I still want to push my plan for what I call a voter core, which is essentially a voter core would be like a core of independent researchers who will basically research bills and research candidates and dig up information that is publicly available, not doxing, but just publicly available information, and then compile it into like a detailed dossier, and then buy radio ads and buy, ad space, and then maybe even buy billboards, and then put messages on the billboards to draw attention to the voter core, and then educate people on what's really going on. Right, you would buy a billboard and it would say, "Isn't it strange that Bernie Sanders went from saying millionaires and billionaires to just billionaires?" And at the bottom it would say, like Los Angeles voter core, right, or whatever the name of that particular core was. And you would probably have like a rank and file structure. You would probably have lead researcher, who would be the leader of the project. You have project lead, head researcher, uh, a number of assistant researchers, and then distributors who would disseminate information whenever, wherever they it would trickle down from the upper ranks, and they would just disseminate the information. And then you would also have financial experts who would pay for the ad spaces, getting the best deals and knowing how to distribute it, almost like marketing and sales. And you would get the idea out there, and then people would know. At the moment, I don't have the means to set it up at the moment, but I am still in the planning phase for establishing the first voter core. I think it would be a wonderful idea. Want to start a Cascadia voting core is what it's going to be called. Going to create Cascadia voting core, and we're just going to like do independent research and distribute the information as widely as possible to try and push voters into voting for the right people without going into voter influence. We'd walk right up to the line of voter influence and then no further. We would just be literally educating people. And then we'd probably have an off season, like during November, during the election season, we would have an off season in order to avoid voter influence. We definitely need something like that to create more intelligent voters who know better and are less selfish, because now they know the truth and won't vote blue anymore. Then, of course, there are the evils of political correctness, which the Democrat Party hosts, being that political correctness prevents, as I've already stated, actual solutions to problems because the solutions are politically incorrect. Political incorrectness is a kind of absolute ideology where they don't allow anything against political correctness, even when it's something that is good. They don't care if it's good. They just want you to be politically corrected. They don't care if it's right. They don't care if it's appropriate. They don't care if it's the right solution. It's politically incorrect. It's bad. That's why they dox people. That's why they block them out. That's why they don't allow them to be voted for. They, kick them out of the party. They spit on them. They digitally spit on them. And they generally, demonize them because they're not politically corrected. And the politically correct narrative ends up causing more harm than good in the end. And the Democrats push that night and day. Talking about detransitioners is now politically incorrect. People who deconverted from trans ideology and wanted to get their original gender back. That's politically incorrect. Talking about I don't know, just talking about anything they don't like is politically incorrect. And then finally, of course, I just want to say that there should be serious consequences for politicians, rather more serious consequences for politicians. Being that certain kinds of rhetoric and certain kinds of ideas should have more serious consequences. Take, for example, this bit in Washington. It happened. An Antifa dude, we have them here, where we've been fucked up by Antifa really well. This dude attacked an immigration center, calling it a concentration camp, literally echoing the rhetoric of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, literally echoing her talking point before trying to light the place up with a rifle and explosives and Molotovs, and ends up getting himself killed. That man's blood is on her hands. She gave him that idea. There should be serious consequences for that. Personally, I think that AOC should have been stricken from every single ballot and kicked out of the Democratic Party right then and there. Like, really serious consequences. She should have been kicked out of the party. She should have her name stricken from the ballot and forced back into becoming a private citizen. Basically, essentially forced into becoming a private citizen once again. She can go back to being a waitress and mess up somebody's order, probably. Hell, I'd probably make a better politician than her. Seriously, I'd probably make a better politician. Vote for me because I'm going to fund your rehab centers and actually introduce good economic theory and get the schools to teach it. Right? Vote for me because I'm going to be hard on crime and I'm going to have the police basically setting traps for Antifa. So anytime they do anything illegal, the cops will pop up out of a garbage can or something and catch them. To just go hardcore. Get some SWAT teams involved. That's what I'd be doing anyway. I'd be attacking all the major problems with plans that probably should work, that were pretty hardcore. That's what I'd be doing. That's what my platform would look like: is better economy, more freedom, safer streets. Right? Who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want that? Uh, but yeah, politicians should definitely be punished for some of the bullshit they do. But you're never going to see that because they basically rule this country with an iron fist. The only body who can give them consequences are themselves. And you know they're not going to do that. But we, the people, can do that. We can give them consequences by stop voting for their shit. We can punish the Democratic Party by not voting for them. And if they start losing votes like crazy and they figure out why, then that should correct the behavior. Hopefully. Either way, never vote blue at all. The Democratic Party is the party from hell. That being the Christian hell with 2 L's. Anyway, with that being said, there will be a link in the description below to my books. Please buy, download, read them, and as always, choose peace.